Hello everybody, and welcome to a Better Late Than Never 2021 retrospective. I've always been a sucker for year-end discussions, so here we are. In this video, I'll be going through different aspects of games and naming honorable mentions, as well as a winner, across different categories. Those categories are Most Enticing Visuals, Best Box Art, Best Multiplayer, Best Soundtrack, Best Individual Song, Best Sound Design, Most Family Friendly, Best Narrative, Best Level, Best Gameplay Mechanic, Best Boss Battle, Best Update for a previously released title, and Game of the Year. Now, some general criteria that I want to establish. For most categories, I'll only be including games that were released in North America for the first time during 2021's calendar year. The Best Update category will only feature games that were released prior to that. In addition, I can only judge the games that I was able to play, so my personal list is not going to include any PlayStation or PC exclusives. In fact, let me show you exactly which games I was able to play from 2021. These will not all be receiving awards, but if you do not see the game listed here, then it will not be included. With that out of the way, let's kick off Azran's top games of 2021. First up, let's talk about Most Enticing Visuals. This category is for games that are a feast for the eyes, whether that's a result of impressive graphics engine or a well-executed art style. My honorable mentions include Forza Horizon 5. The game gives you the freedom to explore an intricately detailed Mexican landscape, even at high speeds. Metroid Dread. The cutscenes are particularly striking, but even during gameplay, the game consistently surrounds its 2D map with gorgeous 3-dimensional set pieces. The entrance to the game's underwater area is a big highlight. Chicory, A Colorful Tale. The entire game is done in a coloring book style, and you, the player, get to fill it in with color. Part of what makes this game visually pleasing is the sense of ownership it gives you. The wealth of brush styles you unlock goes a long way. But the winner is New Pokemon Snap. It's a good thing that this game all about photography features some stunning backgrounds. Bandai Namco have brought Pokemon to a new peak of visual splendor. Across the board, the lighting is evocative, and the whole game has a sheen that screams, "Look at me," which is what you'll be doing for tens of hours if you want to catch them all on film. Next up is Best Box Art. This category is the one time we're allowed to judge games by their covers. Honorable mentions go to Metroid Dread. The contrast between the bright red and pitch blacks is immediately eye-catching. The cover conveys how the 7 Emmy have their sights set on Samus, and her pose shows that she's ready to face the new threat, even after a nearly 20-year hiatus. Bowser's Fury. The faint light emanating from Bowser's fire to show Mario and Bowser Jr. standing against him is just the right amount to show how unique this game is compared to its Mario platforming predecessors. Chicory, A Colorful Tale. The menu select icon shows your player character yearning for adventure, but also feeling cozy amid a world of vibrant colors. It perfectly encapsulates the game without even showing the titular Chicory character. But the winner is The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. I absolutely love the tints of color used for each character. The box art for this game is a fusion of the box art from the original Great Ace Attorney releases in Japan, and they flow into each other seamlessly here. It's especially fun to look at after playing the games to see how each of their characters and their poses fit into the context of the story. On to Best Multiplayer. This category celebrates the games that are best played with other people. Honorable mentions to Monster Hunter Rise. The game has an elegant system for bringing people together on hunting missions, whether friends or strangers. The community is one of the most welcoming to newcomers in all of gaming, so you'll never have to worry about jumping in to figure out the game's systems. I highly recommend trying to take down at least a few beasts as a group, and this is coming from someone for whom Monster Hunter Rise was their first Monster Hunter game. WarioWare, get it together. This entry doesn't have quite as many multiplayer modes as its predecessors, but the trade-off is being able to play the whole campaign in co-op for the first time ever. WarioWare takes some getting used to for newcomers as they frantically try to figure out the microgames, but all of them have such simple controls that they're bound to get it after a few rounds. The shared panic is just part of what makes the game special. Mario Party Superstars, the tried and true Mario Party formula is back. And though it's hard to fathom, Nintendo actually delivered on a seamless and intuitive online experience. By making use of the OS's invite feature and allowing multiple online games to be suspended for later resumption, Mario Party has never been more accessible to people with faraway friends. But the winner is It Takes Two. It's not a game for everyone, I'll be getting into some reasons why later in the video, but its mechanics are imaginative, and it keeps the players on their feet at all times. The sheer volume of puzzle platforming ideas that are contained within this one piece of software is massive. It offers fulfilling challenges for cooperative play, and even throws in a few minigames for a healthy dose of competition. Let's talk about the best music the year had to offer. Psychonauts 2. This game might have the single best cinematic soundtrack I've ever heard. It gives bombast to the main areas while also slowing down for more somber moments. Bravely Default 2. Revo delivers once again on their unique sound style, which incorporates driving electric guitars, twinkling piano, and a string orchestra. Bowser's Fury. Nintendo packed some surprisingly catchy songs during Mario's brief campaign. With string instruments taking the lead, the soundtrack evokes whimsy until the hard rock kicks in for Fury Bowser's reign. But the winner is Cyber Shadow. The game successfully evokes the sound of a classic action platformer while utilizing modern polish. Whenever I think about the best soundtracks, I always flock to those which have the most memorable melodies. Ones that can stand on their own just as well as they work in the context of the game. Now that we've talked about soundtracks on the whole, let's take a moment to appreciate some of the individual tracks that came out of this year. I've got a few samples lined up so that they may speak for themselves. But the winner is This song is not only the catchiest I've heard all year, but it goes the extra mile by adjusting its lyrics depending on your performance in Penny's microgames. By the way, I've got piano versions of Penny's theme, Barrick Van Zeek's, and other songs from Psychonauts 2 on the channel already. They'll be in the playlist linked at the end of the video along with my other works. But now back to the awards. Best sound design is for games whose sounds contribute to the overall immersion factor. Let's recognize Monster Hunter Rise. There are many satisfying sounds generated by a weapon colliding with the hides of various monsters. The hunting horn is my personal go-to. The crew also puts considerable effort into making each of the monsters' calls distinct from each other, so much so that you can hear a threat coming and react accordingly. Shin Megami Tensei 5. This game doesn't employ much of a soundtrack in the overworld, but in its place, you have myriad ambient sounds and the cries of inhabiting demons. They each come together to form a unique flavor that allows the game world to envelop the player. Chicory. The sound work in Chicory is much more subtle by comparison, but I have to give it a shout out here. There are different sound effects that work to convey the exact manner in which the player is painting the world, whether through a harsh dollop or a slow streak. Major points go to the sound effect that plays when the player character swims in their own paint. It is immensely satisfying. But the winner is Metroid Dread. Sound is a critical part of the Metroid experience. It's always been part of how the game conveys their narrative, with little text and dialogue. And while Metroid Dread uses its modern hardware to include more cutscenes and voice lines, it hasn't forgotten the significance of the series' sound design. The sounds continue to play an important role. They alert you to the presence of Emmy and other threats looming in the background. My favorite sound has to be the new missile tank upgrade sound, which forgoes the series' signature jingle in favor of a snappy effect that conveys the process of the tank being attached. Don't worry, the jingle still plays for major upgrades, but now it won't slow down Samus's momentum as you're cleaning up collectibles. Most family-friendly is for games that can be enjoyed across age groups and levels of accessibility. I included this category because a certain program run by Jeff Keighley, aka Goof Knightley, decided It Takes Two was worthy of this award. I want to explain why I think that was a terrible decision. It Takes Two switches between gameplay styles so frequently. The game depends on players knowing common video game tropes and conventions, which makes it great for seasoned players, but not for newcomers. It also features adult themes and language, including an Easter egg where you can listen to the bleeped out version of the creator's F the Oscars speech. And It Takes Two features a scene in which your characters partake in dismemberment. This scene is played for laughs, but is objectively unfunny. The character is clearly expressing its pain and distress as your characters show no remorse. The whole event is brushed aside. The scene is one that a player of any age may find uncomfortable at best and disturbing at most. Do not go into the game expecting a totally wholesome time. With that out of the way, let's get to the actual honorable mentions. Bowser's Fury. When thinking about this category, I always consider my own family. My mom, brother, sister, and I each had a splendid time playing through this campaign. The short mission structure in a big open world with a familiar Mario moveset lent itself well to each of us jumping in. For those who need a little extra help, a second player, or 3 levels of AI, can join as Bowser Jr. Alba, a wildlife adventure. This game is cute. As the title character, you can explore a whole island at your own pace. Follow the story path for a brief tale with a wholesome message about preservation, or just take your time exploring the land to fill out your wildlife encyclopedia. Chicory is a game that you can find joy in, even if you don't know how to play it. Since the entire world is a coloring book, you can find a good time just by messing with the art tools. But for those looking to play the game, there's a few big accessibility features. One is the game's hint system. If you use a phone booth to call home, Mom will give you a subtle hint about where to go. But if you ever find yourself truly stuck, you can get Dad on the phone, and he'll give you a step-by-step walkthrough to your next objective. You can also adjust the amount of help you have for bosses, or skip bosses entirely. Last but certainly not least, a second player can take control of a second paintbrush. So if a younger player wants to join in, they can freely paint your screens, or even help you manage some of the puzzles that have more moving parts. But the winner is Mario Party Superstars. Players of all ages can get into the board game structure. Since so much of the game is based around random chance, it's always anyone's game, regardless of gaming experience. Superstars adds surprisingly robust online features by Nintendo standards that allowed the game to be played by families near and far. In another surprising move, Nintendo did not require motion controls for any portion of the gameplay, so players who may have struggled with that in previous releases needn't worry. Best Narrative is an award that goes to the game that delivers a gripping story, especially one that takes advantage of the medium. Metroid Dread. As I mentioned when I discussed the game's sound design, the game continues to use its environment to tell its story, but Dread takes it further. The series' grand return has gorgeous cutscenes and a few standout character moments. Chicory. Within this coloring book world lies a story about creative minds facing pressure, self-doubt, and anxieties. But when you're slowing down to take in your surroundings, you'll also find moments of humor and good vibes. The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. It's a good thing they released this game as a compilation, because the first game leaves you wanting more. The game turns many Ace Attorney conventions on their head and delivers a captivating set of mysteries. But the winner is Psychonauts 2. This game should be heralded as one of the greats in storytelling. There are some stories that just can't be told in the same way outside the game from which they originate. Psychonauts 2 is a better story because it's a video game. The developers at Double Fine carefully crafted worlds that would portray the characters' mental states, such that platforming through the levels would give you a better understanding of who they are. One example you can see in the game's trailers is a world themed around the 5 senses, and you have to traverse it as the character experiences sensory overload. The game takes it a step further by introducing enemies themed around the character's detriments. In that same level, you repeatedly have to go up against an enemy called the Panic Attack. The enemy moves at ridiculously high speed so as to overwhelm the player. I dare not give any further examples lest I spoil the ingenuity that Double Fine brought to the table. But they deliver quality all the way through the game. All these features are encapsulated by cutscenes that allow the player to stop and take in more of the emotional moments, and this game has many of those. Especially if you're returning to Psychonauts as a franchise from the first game, which released over a decade ago. Best level is for a stage or area in a game that delivers the most memorable moments. Honorable mentions go to the Lentil Sea Floor from New Pokemon Snap. I've got a personal affinity for underwater areas and sea life, so seeing Pokemon freely swimming in the lentil waters was a big highlight of my year in gaming. This level also had what I felt was the most cryptic secret in New Snap, but once I saw that alternate path that waited behind it, I felt it was worth the wait. Ferenia from Metroid Dread. As Samus inches closer to the surface of planet ZDR, she encounters Ferenia. This area greets the player with an oppressive air, as a huge structure looms over Samus. Ferenia expects the player to perform some of the most difficult maneuvers in Metroid Dread, at least as far as optional collectibles are concerned. Evading the enemy on your first visit is another test of the player's skill up to that point. Ferenia also grants one of my favorite new abilities in Dread, which I won't spoil here. The Snow Globe from It Takes Two. Some of the best puzzles in this game are waiting in this gorgeous, wide-open level. Each player holds one pole of a magnet, meaning they're able to attract and repel different objects. But beyond those magnetic challenges lies the game's largest playground. Upon reaching the town, there are so many little things the player can find and tasks they can perform. But the winner is Hollis's Hot Streak from Psychonauts 2. One of the earliest levels in Psychonauts 2, Hollis's Hot Streak is a neon paradise that portrays the mentality of a gambling addiction. The developers make use of the casino games to act as physical manifestations of the emotions Hollis experiences at this stage in the story. Between its visual splendor, the various minigames that provide character insight, and a bombastic, though relatively simple, boss, this level sets the tone for the rest of the amazing game. Best mechanic is for the gameplay component that invites the player to keep coming back for more. Honorable mentions go to the asymmetric co-op of It Takes Two. As much as I berated the game earlier, there is a very solid game line underneath. There are many creative concepts at play. but each level has the same overall structure. Each player has a different ability from the other. Knowing when to use each one, and how to use them in tandem with one another, allows the players to navigate a fantastical world. I mentioned the magnet puzzles earlier, but some other standouts include a level where one player can enlarge and the other can shrink, and a level where one player alters the level geometry while the other platforms through it. The mental connection from Psychonauts 2. I feel this mechanic had a lot more potential than what it ultimately ended up being. In Hollis's Hot Streak, the mental connection is used to forge bonds between ideas to help the character rethink situations. In that level, the developers had a lot of fun with the idea, going so far as to implement unique dialogue options for incorrect connections. However, after the first level, that idea is never revisited, and the mechanic is reduced to a simple grapple to cross large gaps. There is a story justification for this change, but it left me wanting more. The time crystals from Chris Tales. I have issues with this game, but I have to admit that conceptually, the time crystals are intriguing. This mechanic plays a role both in and out of battle. While exploring towns, you can glimpse the past and future, or retrieve certain items from each time period to fulfill otherwise impossible quests. In battle, you can send your foes into either time period. This can change their form into something stronger or something weaker depending on what developments they undergo, but it also creates a new layer to status ailments. As an example, poison will have had more time to take effect if the enemy is sent into the future. An enemy's position will limit which time period they can be sent to, but the possibilities are fun to unravel regardless. But the winner is the checkpoints from Game Builder Garage. 2021 is when Nintendo gave Switch players a chance to learn some of the base concepts of coding in order to construct their own games. The game features some interactive text-based lessons led by a being named Bob. Bob will instruct you on what to do, and then expect you to do it. The lessons are functional, but they mostly boil down to read, do the thing, repeat. I find the early lessons are a bit too wordy for their own good, but the game eventually eases up. Now, all that on its own would make the game kinda disappointing, but luckily Nintendo had a solution for that. After a lesson is complete, another being named Alice will stop you at a checkpoint. This isn't a place you respawn if you die of boredom during Bob's lesson, but rather, it is a point in the game at which she checks to see if you have fully grasped Bob's lessons. Alice will present you with a series of dysfunctional minigames. It is then your job to go into the code and determine what needs to be changed in order to fix the game and win it. She'll limit what you're able to change, and you're able to restore the code to its original settings at any time, so you're never in danger of locking yourself out. It turns the learning experience from a lecture into a puzzle, and as a huge fan of puzzles, these checkpoints became my favorite part of the entire game. Best boss battle is for the enemy who brought the most rewarding and creative challenge for the player to face. Illumina Milotech from New Pokemon Snap. Holy moly, this fight is gorgeous. Okay, fight is a stretch, but the Illumina Pokemon are considered the boss encounters in New Snap. As the player, you need to perform the right actions to draw them out for their photo shoot. With Illumina Milotech, you see it diving in and out of a lake as you try and find the right moment to capture the whole of its majesty. The show-stopping nature of this encounter is what lands it this mention. Truheltion Monstria from Psychonauts 2. This is the culminating moment of one of my favorite levels that takes place later in Psychonauts 2. You've entered the mind of a character who's distraught by myriad events in his life. These events have motivated him to take up drinking, and have been caused by his drinking. It's a cycle that needs to be broken, so naturally the whole boss takes place in a whirlpool. Fury Bowser's from Bowser's Fury. After evading him from mission after mission, Mario eventually has enough cat shines to take on Fury Bowser in the most logical way possible, by growing into a Super Saiyan cat and swiping at him. The scale of the fight makes it a fun romp, but with the exception of the final battle, it's a short-lived experience. But the winner is Experiment Z57 from Metroid Dread. This was the boss that had me take full advantage of Samus's arsenal of abilities. Its attacks hit such a large area that it is essential to know how to dodge using her different movement options. This boss also stands out for the special animation that plays out if you're able to pull off a melee counter against it. Metroid has always been known for making you experience power fantasy in the late game, and this boss delivers that feeling in spades. And it's not even the final boss. I wasn't going to spoil the final boss here anyway, but Experiment Z57 wins on the basis of being that turning point where the power fantasy creeps in. The Best Update category allows us to celebrate games that received new content in 2021 despite releasing in a prior year. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, with the remainder of Fighters Pass 2, it gave us Kazuya Mishima, Pyra and Mithra, and Sora. And Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity received its expansion pass in 2 waves. First, it received an unlockable character and new weapons that you could earn through challenge stages. Then, it received some side story stages which yielded further weapons and characters. But the winner is Animal Crossing New Horizons, with version 2.0 and the addition of Happy Home Paradise. Nintendo finally delivered on many of the features that fans have been missing from past Animal Crossing entries. But what earns this game my recognition is how well the DLC campaign is tied into the main Animal Crossing game. Unlike the original Happy Home designer, Happy Home Paradise is not a standalone experience, or at least you're not required to treat it as such. Home designing techniques that were not present in the base game can be unlocked and brought over, giving you more room to play around with you and your villagers' homes. Tasks on your main island and in the DLC campaign both serve to help you progress in the other. The DLC is not worthwhile for everyone, but I imagine many of the same people who picked up New Horizons are also the type of people who would be willing to sit down with the home designer and unleash their creativity. This finally brings us to the overall Game of the Year for 2021. Here are my top 3 games in no particular order. It's down to Metroid Dread, Psychonauts 2, and Chicory: A Colorful Tale. I've sung their praises numerous times across the category awards, but there can only be one Game of the Year. And it is Metroid Dread. I found the game so enthralling that I played it to 100% item completion in its debut weekend. And despite that, there were times I considered giving it another go. I'm not usually into difficult games, but the challenge in Metroid Dread felt just right. Combined with the astonishing visual and oral polish that's been over a decade in the making, and a surprising story delivered both by the game's environment and with sparing cutscenes, it all comes together to give you an experience that sits in the masterclass of video games. Thanks for watching this look back at 2021. If you're interested to see something like this again, consider liking the video or leaving a comment. And if you're interested in piano covers of video game music, original music, or game streams with a focus on wacky shenanigans, then subscribe to the channel and you'll find plenty of that. Until we meet again.